Hello, everyone. This is Mara Sievers, creator of Pilates Encyclopedia, and I am here today with Nic Lenny of Soul Pilates in Bristol in the UK. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Mara.
How are you today?
Really good, thank you. Yeah, really good.
Good, awesome. So, Soul Pilates just became a partner studio of the Pilates Encyclopedia teacher training program. So we're super excited about that. And I'm here just today to have a conversation with Nick about life as a Pilates teacher. How about that?
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Super excited.
Yeah.
So why don't you start by just introducing a little bit like yourself and your studio, like what do you guys offer, anything that we need to know about you in the studio?
Yeah. So I'm based in Bristol in the UK. I've got two studios here. The one that I'm in now actually was our brand new studio, which only got opened for a day and then kind of got put on pause with the year we've had. But the other studio we've had for over 5 years now. It's based within an osteopathic practice. So I don't think you've got them in the States, but basically a medical practice that has lots of kind of complementary health procedures, acupuncture, physio, all of that kind of stuff is in there. And so because of that, the nature of it is it's quite physio based, I guess, quite rehabilitation based. So we have two spaces in there, one space which has got all the full range of equipment, and then one space that we ran sort of small mat classes in. And yeah, I guess the nature, I trained with Polestar. So I've been a teacher for about 8 years now. And the nature of kind of Polestar is very kind of looking at some rehabilitation stuff, although I would argue that everybody probably needs an element of rehabilitation no matter how fit they are. And so I kind of went into the studio not really quite sure what we were ever going to be, but I think the more I kind of assess and really look at what we are, I think we're really helping people use movement to reduce pain, to feel better in their lives. I think the thing that always surprises me is the mental well-being aspect of it too. And previous to the pandemic, we were running equipment classes, so small group classes on all the equipment, almost like a Pilates gym, I guess, mat classes, bar, pre and postnatal, that kind of thing, as well as actually taking some of our mindful movement approach into some kind of more fitnessy things like HIIT and things like that, where I feel that actually there is still a need for the same level of functional movement that can often get missed in those classes. So that's where we were. But I suppose now where we are is our focus is very much on one-to-ones at the moment and really supporting people through those.
That's great. That sounds like a pretty big operation you got there.
Yeah, it started off as me in a room with a bit of a dream, not a client on my books. But previous to this, I was worked in marketing. I was a director of a marketing team, and I'd used Pilates really. I'd kind of discovered Pilates in my mid-20s. It was the one thing that I stuck with. Like I did it every week. I never felt too tired to go ever. I used to make it part of my lunch break activity. And I loved it so much. And then I got to kind of my late 20s and everyone around me was doing a master's degree and maybe looking at marketing and things like that. And I just probably said a lot about me. I couldn't really think about doing a master's in marketing. And someone said to me, why don't you think about training as a Pilates teacher? And I was like, oh, maybe, I'd never really seen it as a huge career goal, but I did it, started to learn there is so much more to it than I ever thought. And then when I moved to Bristol, actually, so I lived up in the north of England, I moved down here, and then there weren't really any big studios. I actually got to know the guys who run the practice that I'm now in because I kept getting into back pain because I wasn't doing enough movement in the right way. And then the rest is history, really. They sort of said to me one day, why don't you think about doing this? And it took about another year and a half before I kindly felt brave enough to kind of leave that career and literally me in a room on my own. But now, before the lockdown anyway, we had about 20 teachers working with us.
Oh, wow.
And kind of being open 7 days a week. And then the plan with the new studio is to very much make it a reformer class studio. So we've got 9 reformers here, and then we were going to have another kind of 10 teachers on in this space as well.
That's amazing. So I have 2 follow-up questions. One that I want to ask later about your marketing background and how that relates to Pilates. I think that's super interesting, at least for me, and I'm sure for everybody else out there too. But the other follow-up question right now is, do you guys so what I love is that you really cover a really broad range, right, with your studio. So you do serve a population that has rehabilitative needs, but then also the opposite of like HIIT and just, you know, group reformer classes of people who are healthy, who just want to work out and be fit.
Yeah.
So do you have some sort of intake process where you sort of screen people and tell them this is what I would recommend for you and this is what I would not recommend for you?
Yeah, you know, it's a really good question. And I think, you know, ideally, you would always want to see everyone for a one-to-one, you know, absolutely. You're just going to get so much more knowledge from seeing them move and what they need and provide really good guidance. But the truth is, you get a lot of people who come straight to a class. And it's one of the things we've had to always work on with the team is when you see someone who comes to a class, and sometimes they've been referred to Pilates and they've been told to go and do a Pilates class. And so someone who's more experienced than us in their mind, like a physiotherapist, has said that, and they're saying, you know, and so you then have to tread quite carefully. You know, some people are absolutely fine in the class, but some people you think, you know, I'd rather you were moving than not moving. But the truth is, you're not going to get better in this group class. You need to have some individual attention on what's going on. And then absolutely, and really that's where the classes came about, was to say, when we've worked with people one-to-one, where do they then go to, you know? And the people that I see who get the best results are people who do move to group classes, but always continue to dip into one-to-ones. So we offer like a telephone consultation service. So if someone is thinking of joining us, they can ring up and talk to us. And then at that point, you know, really, if they've been referred to us, if they're in pain, we really try and encourage them to come for a one-to-one. But I think the balance has to be that you don't put them off coming to a class at all, because you're like, well, I'd rather you move than you didn't move. And sometimes it's just about how you pitch that into somebody, especially, you know, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but the reasons people are in pain can be quite deep rooted. And the last thing you want to do is make them feel any more uncomfortable than they might already do. So sometimes a group class can feel safer for a person because they feel like they can kind of hide in it a little bit. But those are the reasons why I want you on your own in the studio so I can really see you. So yes, we have a process, but we try and be a little bit flexible. Sometimes that process is up front. Sometimes someone comes for a one-to-one thinking that they can then come to group classes, and we really try and then explain to them. And actually, usually at the end of the one-to-one, they know themselves that they're not ready for a class, which is really important. But sometimes they do come to a class and you do try and, you know, manage it accordingly, and just, you know, you try and guide them with your expertise and say, look, my job is to help you get the best results. And this is what I'm recommending, but you have the choice, you know, unless it's dangerous, which it very rarely is. You know, that's kind of how we handle it, certainly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love what you just said. There was one thing I wanted to ask about. Oh yeah, what's interesting is I love your observation of some people feel safer in a group class because they can hide. And it's so interesting because a lot of the times people are afraid of working with a trainer one-on-one because they think, you know, now that all the focus is on them, they think they have to be better, when really it's the opposite. The one-on-one experience is so that I, as the teacher, can change the class/session to fit you better, versus you have to fit into the mold of the sequence and the exercises that we happen to choose in that class. So it's so interesting that people have that opposite reaction to a one-on-one experience, which they might not have with a physical therapist, right? Because they go to a physical therapist and they might think, oh, they're there to help me heal. But with a Pilates teacher, they think they're there to help me like feel worse or something, like, you know, like torture me and push me towards something that I'm not able to do yet.
And I think that's really true. And I think, you know, there are so many styles of Pilates out there that, yeah, you can go to some places and it's very fitness based, and, you know, that's fine for what it is. But actually, sometimes I can feel a bit frustrated that, you know, and I've had to say, look, we are the experts in movement. I can't do what they can do, but they can't do what I can do. And and sometimes some of the things that they're being told to do from, you know, the 5 minutes at the end of your physical therapy session that you get as exercises. I'm like, well, I wouldn't do that. Let me explain to you why I wouldn't do that. You know, so it's trying to kind of get that expertise across. And the other thing I think people can feel is quite scared of the equipment. Mm-hmm. And they can feel that the equipment is advanced. Oh, I don't want to do a reformer or an equipment class. I'd rather do a mat class because I'm a beginner. And you, again, there's an education piece of saying, actually, you know, the equipment is where we treat all our rehab patients. It's where, you know, you get the feedback. And yes, of course you can make it advanced, but actually, if your body doesn't have a movement pattern in it, it's going to be very hard for you to find that on the mat with no feedback and to change that. And really that's what I try and explain to people. That's really all we're trying to do, is provide the nervous system with information so it is more efficient. That's literally all I'm trying to do. Right. And so, the more information I can give it, and that's where the equipment comes. But that can also be a barrier. I think people can think that looks like very sexual or very scary. I hear some really interesting things, and it's exactly that. And you're like, but yet they wouldn't have that insecurity going one-on-one with someone who they feel is more in the medical sector, which is always interesting, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I love having these conversations, because I think there's so much misunderstanding and misconception going on about Pilates. Pilates is wonderful, but as you said, there are so many different styles, and just because it's Pilates, like there's 101 where you can like personalize the program to whatever the person can do. So actually, a tiny little side note, I hurt my knee skiing the other week, and so it was really swollen and really bad, and I'm waiting for my MRI and all of that. But I was able to do a wonderful reformer workout this past week, because first, I know how to adapt my program. I know how to do, a whole sequence, a whole hour of practice without even bending or using my knee. And that's wonderful, right? That's amazing. I don't have to stop Pilates. I can continue Pilates. I'll just do a different sequence, different exercises. And I think that's just the brilliance of it. So that's a lot of education, I think, for all of us in Pilates. Yeah. It's a lot of education of the general population of what it is that we do.
And I think, we rebranded last year, at the end of last year, actually, or the year before. And one of the things that kind of came up is actually being called Soul Pilates can actually people can have a sense of what that is that might be quite wrong from who we are, and how do we try and get that across, because Pilates means often very different to what we are to most people, and they feel like they can get it in the same kind of Pilates in a big gym, for example, and things like that. So, it's just to kind of, there is definitely, you're trying to educate people all the time into why would you go to a specialist studio and spend that kind of money versus where you can get Pilates, for free as part of a gym membership. And they all have a place. And actually, that's how I started Pilates, was at a gym, and had a really good instructor, but it was very different from where I got to. But like I said, I think, they all have a place. Totally. But it's just, there's an education piece of how you differentiate yourself, because, occasionally I've had people coming in and they really, really want to work out and they don't feel comfortable with some of the stuff I'm trying to get them to do. And there's a whole reason, I'm sure we'll talk about it. Yeah, they're not ready to meet that place in themselves, and they're used to kind of doing a different style. And so that's always kind of interesting too. And I know that some people, they just want to go and they just want to work out, and they want to work out in the Pilates style, and why not? Like that's, it can be fun. I think the way we do it, it's quite deep, the work, it can go into lots of different levels. And so, it's kind of difficult. How do you explain that on your website to someone new when they're looking around?
People are not going to understand that. And not everybody will be ready and willing to do this sort of tiny little work. I had one student at my studio who she was wonderful. She came to me with a frozen shoulder, and she made tremendous progress, and it was all really, really wonderful. So she appreciated Pilates a lot. But once she got better, she was like, she kept telling me, I hate the small stuff. I hate the small stuff. Can I please just do some hardcore work? So you try and do a little bit of both. You try and keep her happy, and give her a few more challenging things, because that's what she really enjoys. But at the same time, keep working on the fundamental issues, because otherwise she's never going to break that barrier, right?
And I think that's the balance, isn't it? I think you have to pitch into somebody with what they want. They've paid for that session. They should get what they want. But I also think, and feel really passionate about, you have to try and drip in what they need, and they might not know that they need. And then I think the other piece to this that has been something that I've always had to work with myself personally is the kind of person that you are. So I am somebody who sits on the stressy end of the spectrum. I like to be at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So when I go to work out, I want to work out at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Is that good for me? Probably not. And actually, the interesting thing is when you slow down and you get your nervous system to be more balanced, actually, you'll get more toned, have less pain, you'll probably lose more weight, if you look at the science behind it. But I think that's the other kind of level that's in this, is like, where is that person coming from? What day have they had that day? And people will want to do whatever feels comfortable to them. So if beasting themselves is what they've always done, and they kind of have this whole no pain, no gain ethos in every facet of their life, then slowing them down is going to feel really uncomfortable for them. So I think that's, a real tricky part of our job, is to pitch it right. And exactly as you said, like I've had clients like that too, where you're like, right, let's go and do this, this, and this, and let you get that out of your system. Or sometimes they'll do this, this, and this, and they'll feel it for themselves and say, I'm actually not doing this very well, am I? Like, no, should we work out how to do it? And they'll be like, oh, okay, fine. Yeah, I've bought into that now, So I think that's one of the tricky things as a teacher is, especially one-on-one, is reading all of that situation. And, I definitely, as I've got more experienced, I really don't lesson plan. I might have a rough idea, but I tell you what, every time I plan, it goes out the door. Because someone who walks in, they come in different to how they came in last week, or and what they say to you or what you see in their body takes you somewhere completely different. And I think, and that's quite, it's quite full on too, to always be kind of planning as you go with people.
Totally true. So many good points that you're bringing up. I usually go into a lesson with a plan, but I might not end up sticking to it. And just
Same with me. Yeah. I've now worked out that I just have like a few places I'd like to take them. And in my mind, I know what that journey would be, but then I can kind of play with it. But yeah, then someone will walk in and say, actually, I fell off my bike yesterday and I've hurt my back, and you're like, okay, well, we're probably not going to do all that other stuff then. We'll have a look at that instead, So yeah.
That's awesome. So what's your favorite aspect of being a Pilates teacher?
I think, I love helping people. I think I kind of went into this not actually appreciating that side of it at all. I think I had done a lot of Pilates. I was doing a lot of advanced Pilates classes before I was a teacher. And then, you go and do your training and they do something like the pelvic clock and you're going, I don't even know this. Like what, my goodness, there's so much more to this thing. I mean, it's a pelvic clock, or like dead bugs or, and I think the detail in it. So I think, there's so much more to it. And I think I never really appreciated that through movement, how much, my experience as well was I had a car accident in my early 20s and I'd been left with really severe kind of shoulder pain and pain down into my arm, kind of quite neural pain. I'd seen a load of physical therapists. I then, through my private medical, had gone to see a neurosurgeon who then said, actually, there's nothing wrong with your shoulder, it's your neck. And then he said, look, you need to maybe see a pain specialist and you need to have these facet joint injections. And then maybe the pain specialist said, maybe then you'll need to have some surgery where we basically burn the nerve in your neck. Because I literally could take my arm above my head once and then that was it. I had so much discomfort and I'm left-handed, okay? And I was left to believe that was my lot. I did a lot of Pilates as a client. I wasn't a teacher then. I did a lot of Pilates as a client. I was seeing physical therapists. I was seeing pain specialists, all that kind of thing. And then I started training with Polestar. And then through that training, you have to basically rehabilitate your whole body. That's kind of very much their thing. You go on a big, big journey and it can be very frustrating because you think, I can't do this. I'm never going to be able to do this. And you're spending an absolute fortune on one-to-ones going and having them. But I tell you what, it really showed me from my own personal experience, like the power of this work, because that is what got rid of my pain. It wasn't 1 or 2 sessions. It was a few years. It took me 2.5 years to be able to do the extension work over the barrel, but I got there and now I can do it without really any thought. It's amazing where your body can get to. And I think that for me is what I love about my job is like, when somebody is willing to work with you and to appreciate it's not necessarily a quick fix. Sometimes you get things quite quickly, but it takes some time. I think that's such a big piece for me. And I think that kind of being a bit of a detective, like I said, people come in and what they're saying is not necessarily what you're seeing in their movement and things like that. And you're kind of working out. And then, sometimes the neck will be better. And then suddenly they're talking about something in their hip or their pelvis and, things move around their body and you're trying to work with them on that. And for me, that's what I really love. I love the power that we all have and trying to educate people, because I think so many people believe this is my lot,
Mhm.
and it really isn't. Like, it really isn't. And and it's not just through Pilates. I truly believe anything chronic, people need to look holistically. And unfortunately, that's a bit of trial and error, and you have to give things a bit of a fair go. But I think that for me is what I love. I love the power of this work. I love dealing with people. I actually love, people with long-term pain. You'll know this as well. It's not just mechanical. There's lots of stuff going on emotionally, energetically, their family life, all of that. And I don't pretend to be a counselor, and I don't try and do that. But I think being able to listen and to help people understand that that is as much part of their back pain as what you're seeing on an MRI scan, I think is important. And so that for me is what I think I realized literally was my calling. And there is nothing that makes me feel happier than working with those people who they're ready for that journey, and they kind of get it, and they're happy to kind of listen to you, and realize that it's not just an hour of exercises that you're going to do, that some of the talking is part of it, and kind of them feeding back is a huge part of it as well. I mean, that's what I love.
Yeah, that's awesome. So many good things. What is your least favorite aspect of being a Pilates teacher?
I think this is tricky. I think one of the things that is challenging about being a Pilates teacher is I think there's a lot of talk up front about the training, and then you're a teacher. And I don't think there's very much support thereafter. And I think that's hence why this is amazing that you're doing this series. And I think, it can feel quite isolating at times. I think that's why being part of a studio is nice, because for all the reasons that I said that I love, you can also be left with clients that absolutely flummox you. And you want to ask someone for their opinion and some thoughts, or I'm certainly someone who I sort of think when I talk. So, it's nice to bounce ideas off. So I think finding that community, I think, is important. But also I think, depending on where you end up pitching yourself as a Pilates teacher, I actually think the financial side of it, or the lack of information on that, is really tricky. And from my perspective, I was wanting to leave quite a high powered job, and I asked a lot of people, a lot of educators, I kind of just wanted a gauge on the finances. I wasn't wanting someone to promise me a salary. I just wanted a gauge. And I think that can feel, just like a complete gap in your knowledge. And I don't think that there's a lot of support for the business side. And whether you're an individual teacher or a studio owner, and even an individual teacher within a studio, like, you are your own business. And I think there are skills to that about, some of my teachers say to me, I don't feel comfortable with the selling.
Mhm.
I don't see it as selling. I see it as the expertise. Like, I would never recommend something that I don't think somebody should do, but people have come to us because they want our support. But, there's no training. That's, as a studio, we do a lot of training like that, just to help people feel comfortable in that bit, because they feel comfortable in the Pilates teaching bit. But then, so I think for me, the business and the financial side of it can be frustrating, in just a lack of understanding, like where you pitch yourself, how much you should charge, all the kind of those aspects of it can feel frustrating. And I think the other piece is when you have somebody who isn't willing, a client who isn't willing to come on the journey, for whatever reason, and there's a whole host of reasons, but you can really see where they could get to, but for whatever reason, they just kind of miss it. They're maybe not ready to commit there emotionally, energetically. Maybe that's quite a scary place, and who knows what their story is. But that can just you can feel quite low. You can feel like, I failed, like I should have done better. I should have read that situation better. I could have handled it differently. And so that side of it can feel a bit, because you're working with people, and people will always have their own things that they're bringing with them.
Absolutely. And it's so hard in the beginning when you first, finish your training and you start teaching real people, and you have these conversations about, like, are you going to continue? And, all this, the selling that you're saying is, you don't know whether whether you did something wrong, or whether the client is not ready. And with experience, like at this point, right, in my career, I know whether it's me or them, because I know whether I've done a good job explaining what I do, whether, whatever. I know now. But that takes 10 years to build up the experience to get confident with that. When you're first a new teacher, we constantly sort of question ourselves, right? because there's so much to know about the human body and we never know enough. So we are always left with the feeling, oh, there's probably something I don't know about it, aside from all the mental and psychological aspects that you brought up, and emotional, aside from that, right? So there's always this doubt that, yes, I did something wrong and now this person doesn't want to continue.
I think that's really true. And I think one of the things I love about this work is there's always more to learn. So that's just really exciting. But that can also be things you don't, because I think, you and I see people all the time getting caught up on, when I've done this course, I'll be good enough. When I do this, it's like there's going to be this magic place. But it's somebody's confidence. It's like you said, and you've got to kind of have a confidence in what you're teaching them, not because you're the best teacher in the world, but because you know more than them, and actually allowing them to move in a safe way will have a benefit regardless. And I think, yeah, that's the piece I think people can kind of miss a little bit as well, is that,
I love everything, like every single sentence that you're saying, Nick. I love it. It's so, so true. Yeah, totally. I
because
don't
I do
even,
think people really think there is this magic formula of trainings equals
yeah,
awesome teacher. But some of the best teachers I've seen are not even the most highly qualified, but they've got something about them that they can feel and read someone and take them on a journey and get them to buy into this experience. And then, of course, I'm not saying you don't need the knowledge, of course, the movement, but I've kind of touched upon the part about the other stuff, Samara, because for me, I expect the movement stuff to be there. Like, you're a trained teacher, you should know this stuff. But the other bits are really where I think you truly make a difference to somebody's life, and that bit can be taught to an extent, but I think it's very much someone kind of has it, don't they? They have something about them. And that's why some of the best teachers, or some of the most popular teachers, some of the teachers who are consistently busy, aren't necessarily the highest qualified teachers at all. And that's just, I always find that just a really interesting thing. Equally, I love all the training, but I think you've got to really balance how much learning you do and what you're learning about, and don't get yourself too overwhelmed with different takes, because there's so many different takes on this work, and you've got to kind of find your own way through it and take bits of different things together, don't you? And I think I see this in people training all the time. The Polestar exam, for example, is quite a lengthy process. I think yours is as well, in a really good way. And there's a process there where you're able to give stuff some time to breathe and to get your knowledge up. But then, of course, what people often approach me about is, oh, I've seen this course and I've seen this. And I often say the same thing. I'm like, stick to the training that you're doing, stick to the language that you're learning. And then when you've done that, bring in the flavors that you're called to. But otherwise, I think we can just get like, I get people all the time saying, but Nic, how do you teach a roll down? I've seen it taught like 20 different ways. I'm like, there's like probably 100 different ways to teach it, And so it's kind of finding that balance of the knowledge and the training, and you just feeling confident in your work, really.
absolutely. So that's, for instance, one thing that in my work that I do with the Pilates Encyclopedia and also the teacher training program, what's so important to me is that trainees or, new teachers learn that, or accept that right from the start. There's a million ways how you can do each exercise. That's why you have to understand the anatomy underneath it. You have to understand how the body moves, because each person is their own little universe. So for each person, a movement looks differently, feels differently, even though, yes, we generally have the same anatomy, but there are so many factors that influence what it looks like and what it feels like to the person, and whether it's helpful. And
Yeah.
Ultimately it's a dialogue, right? So when I think the soft skills, I'm trying to get a little bit more towards like, what is it that you talked about? Like, what is it about, maybe an intuition or something that is beyond the facts of the training that you learn? And I think it's basically a dialogue between the student and the teacher. You as the teacher need to see what happens as a result of your instruction, right? And I think that in the beginning is hard, because a new teacher is really focused on sending the message to the client, do this, do that, because I've learned in my training this is how it goes. And they're not allowing, they don't have the capacity at this point, right? Because they're overflown with like output. They don't have the mental capacity at this point to let the information come in and then make a decision from there, right? Because if I say something and it results in a different outcome, I need to see, first of all, see that and recognize that it's not what I wanted them to do. And then I need to have my anatomical knowledge to discern of what it is that they actually did, because the student might have misinterpreted my instruction and done something different that I wanted. So how do I, right? So there's so many different processes, but basically it's just a dialogue. And maybe I just want to talk briefly about what you said about that, not, you don't need another course. And it's so true too. Most people think most teachers think they're gonna be financially successful once they have more knowledge and took more courses, right? So they keep taking more courses. And yes, you're right, you definitely need some understanding, but you can learn a lot just from your student by giving yourself permission to go away from the training. So to say, okay, this is what I learned, but this client can't deal with what's in the book. They can't do it that way. So how can they do it? And even if it's not right, whatever that means, right? But if they can sort of make it work in their body, then try it. And then it's my homework and my journey as in terms of growing as a teacher, to go home with that information, maybe look it up, go into my anatomy books and look it up. What could that mean? Which muscle could be affected, right? So I mean, from my experience in my journey, I learned with every single student that I've taught, right? You learn something, you see something that you've never seen before, you go home and stick your head back.
My clients have taught me more than any course.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have courses. I'm not saying that at all. But sometimes what the courses do is add the knowledge and the education on top of what you're seeing. But some of my most complex clients, I still think of the first guy who ever walked into our studio. He's still there. He has taught me more than anyone else. He had 20 years of pain. He had seen every specialist known to man. He walked into the studio very open and willing to learn. I'm there day one of basically, qualification, going, I don't really know what I'm doing, to be honest. I don't. And I remember just thinking, well, I'll just sort of do the principles and the basics. And you're right, like at first you're very much like, this is the cue and this is what it's all about. But as time went on with him and with other people, I think what I've learned is just to step back, to say less. And, I love to talk, but I always find it funny when apprentices always say to us, say very much in your sessions, which I think I say a lot, but apparently I don't so much, because I want to kind of, like you said, I want to see how something lands in their body. And actually, if they do something wrong, I'm kind of interested why have you done that? From what I've said, what does that say about you? And and I think you don't feel as afraid if you put them on a piece of equipment to do something and it's just not working. You don't feel as afraid to just, let's get off that, let's go somewhere else, that's just not working. Whereas at first you feel like that's maybe you as a failure as a teacher. So I think allowing your teachers, your clients, to teach you is so important. And when the teachers ask me for advice, most of the how do I work with this person, or this is a challenge I'm having with this person, honestly my answers are mostly coming from my experience, not from the trainings. Equally, I love a training, I do trainings all the time, but I try and really pitch them. I'm interested in stuff that I go, I have a client base that has this problem, yes, let's get them, back to that place about being on your own a lot. It's nice to then be in a group with someone who's, got more expertise and more experience in this area, and listening to him or her. And then you get to ask questions and you can say, I've got this client, this is what I see. And then, and so suddenly the whole thing, that's where I think that kind of stuff becomes really valuable. I think where it isn't valuable is where you're basically insecure and you're looking for a training to provide you with a confidence, and a training will never provide you with that. You have to, that's a different kind of thing they need to work on.
I think it's the experience, right? That you just brought that up. And that's one reason. So my teacher training program, I really encourage people only to take my teacher training program if they want to be a full-time teacher. Because the reason is because Pilates is actually really hard. Like when you described earlier how you dig deeper, I see this as like an elevator going really down deep into the center of the earth. And you just, with every year that you teach, you go one level deeper and you explore more and more and more. So there's so much to learn. And the lack of confidence that I think a lot of new teachers have is because they don't have the experience. And in order to get experience, you need to teach a lot of hours. So in order to become a really good, confident, successful teacher, you need to spend at least 20-30 hours teaching a week, as many as you can do in the beginning. If you only, quote unquote, teach 3-4 hours a week, you're just never going to get the hours in that you need to feel
Yeah.
really confident, unless you just teach only mat classes or only reformer classes and you have a set group that's the same, and it's different. But
And that was definitely my experience because, I was in a marketing role. So I found it very, very difficult to get teaching hours in before my exam because I wasn't qualified. So it was very difficult. I had student insurance and I could teach somebody I knew. But like in terms of, like you said, being able to see enough people, that was really, really tricky. So really, it was that day one that I talked about. That's really when it started. I kind of always say it's a bit like learning to drive, isn't it? Like you learn to drive and then suddenly you pass your test and then you're out in the car on your own and you're like, oh, right, this is kind of where I learned to drive now. Like I can technically drive. And I think it's exactly the same. So for me, it was absolutely suddenly being full time into it and being bombarded with, also when you're training, you tend to work with a lot of other Pilates teachers.
yeah.
And when you're working, that's not what you get. And you get such a vast array of people. And you just never experience anything like that in the pure training. And I think, that's the other piece that I think is quite missing is, I know you can come and do apprentice hours. I get that. But, I know some studios that I kind of almost take on apprentice teachers where I guess they're paid a little bit less. I'm not sure of how it works, but they're brought on and they're under somebody. And, I'm sure there's a kind of process there. And I think that's how it used to be a long time ago before a lot of the official things came in. But actually, I think that's kind of needed because it is a vocational training. And I think sometimes literally being able to work with real people supervised in some way is really important, because that's when you learn.
It's the
And that
thing.
would give you the confidence.
It's the thing. Like there's two examples. First of all, so that's why I'm so excited about the hybrid training that we're offering, because people, trainees study online, they study at home. That's all good. They learn the coursework, they learn all the theoretical stuff, but then they are in a real studio with real clients, like you're just describing, right? And they can get really experience. Like one of my trainees currently, it's bless her heart, like she's having a hard time because especially right now, and as you said, first of all in these experiences, so she has to do Zoom right away, which is harder, and then also she there's not a lot of clients, like you said, who you can like convince to let me teach you again. So the client that she's working with a lot is has just a lot of physical limitations going on. So she's really being sort of tested right now because he basically can't do anything that's like in the book. She has to modify everything. So it's hard in the beginning, but it's such a good learning experience. It really prepares you for real life versus.
Because I remember like qualifying and, I don't know, maybe the studio had been open a few months anyway. And I go back to this client that I talked about who had a similar kind of a lot of issues. And I remember, you're trained to kind of do your 6-week plan and your 10-week plan, your 12-week plan. And I kind of like rang up my tutor and I was like, I'm never going to progress this. And she said to me, she goes, the truth is, Nic, most people will never progress. Forget all that stuff. I have to understand that you understand how to progress it. But if you can give that person a pain-free movement experience every week and you can make teeny weeny changes. So for her to be getting that at this stage is quite a lot to ask, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess we all have to learn it at one point, right? Yeah, but at least during the training you have the support and you can keep asking your teacher and you don't feel like, oh, now I'm certified, I'm supposed to know it, sort of, but.
And I actually think that's what's really lovely about your course, actually, because some of the physical courses, you don't actually get that in between support from the physical weekends. So yes, you get these great physical weekends, but then you're kind of like left to it. And depending on where you're coming from, if you're literally brand new to this kind of training, like, it's a big ask. And to have partnerships with real life people you can see, or people like yourself to be able to kind of have, I think that's amazing. And I think that's why I'm excited to partner with you on this, because I think that's not really on offer, really, and so that's what people need, like you said, is that for the confidence building, because actually that's how you build the confidence, is to ask questions and to learn.
Right.
And maybe to realize that what you were doing was the right approach as well sometimes,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What the other part that I actually really love about the hybrid situation that we're in right now. So as part of her training, she has to submit a video of me. So she basically teaches a Zoom class or a Zoom session to her client, and she sends me the video and I give her feedback. This feedback experience, because I have the video and the recording, I can explain exactly what happened, after the fact, in every single exercise and how, she could have fixed it in a better way. In a live experience, you never can do that. I mean, I gave notes at the end of, such a supervised session sort of, but it's already been passed and the client is not there anymore. And you don't want to talk in front of the client. You don't want to make anybody feel bad about their body, and you don't want them to wait around. It's awkward when you talk third person about somebody who's in the room. So the fact that we can do this via video, it's so amazing. I mean, she loves it. She told me how much she loves the feedback because I can, use my cursor and I can exactly draw lines. And so it's really, that's a huge benefit. I know that there's some downsides with not being in the same room with the person, but there are upsides too.
I think what that process does, though, more than anything else, is you're actually able to assess the teacher.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you're truly seeing them in their natural environment, for want of a better phrase, and that's really powerful, I think, because you can't help but be in like exam type mode when you're in front of a tutor who's watching you, and you usually specifically pick the kind of person you want to work on, who you think will, whereas actually to be kind of forced into being assessed as a teacher means that you become a better teacher.
Yes,
not just someone who can pass an exam and tick a load of boxes. You're actually now assessing and feeding back on how they behave as a teacher, not just how they behave in teaching, a repertoire. And I think that's the other big piece for me, is that Pilates is often seen, but is so much more than just exercises. Anyone can teach exercises. I don't think everyone can teach Pilates. I think, movement and the kind of strategy of movement and how you find things in your body, and, learning connections that you might have lost a long time ago is really amazing. And I think, that's what you get to do in that experience of watching their Zoom classes. You get to see the whole experience that they're creating, and not just marking exercises being taught.
Right. As well as themselves, right? I love the fact that you mentioned, yes, they're not under the pressure. Like there's nobody else in the room when they're teaching that class. So they don't feel like they're being watched, even though they, are going to be later on, but it's a little bit more freeing. You can be a little bit more yourself. I think that's really good. And of course I lost my other train of thought, but that's fine. I'll find it. I'll come back to it. So I want to, ask a question that I think is going to also tie us in with the other point about your least favorite part about being a Pilates teacher, with the financial issue. So what do you wish you had known before you started your training?
That's a good question. I think probably the conversation that we've just had, don't expect, because you're qualified, you're like this amazing teacher, but that doesn't mean you're a crap teacher either. Like you have all the knowledge. You're going to have more knowledge than your clients, but this is a journey, not through trainings, but through experience. And the only way you can do that, and as long as you always fall back on the principles, you will always give someone a positive experience. Like that's just a fact. But all the other stuff that you might see and admire from your tutors and people you work around, that just comes through practice and through experience, and you'll get there as well, so just to kind of be a bit less hard on yourself at the beginning, I think is probably something really, and I think
Easier said than done, right?
yeah.
But, yeah. I want to talk real quick about the financial aspect that you had mentioned, because the misconception I think that I see a lot of trainees have is they look at the prices that the studio charges. Maybe here in the US, maybe you charge somewhere, it's a broad range, but maybe they charge between $60 and $100 for an hour. And you think that this is what you will get paid. Yeah. And that is just not it. There's overhead, there's rent, room rent, there's equipment, there's the studio owner who does all the marketing and all of that. So you cannot expect to make all of the money per hour that that the studio charges for that. I think that is the first misconception. A lot of people think they're going to make a lot more than they actually make. The other misconception I think there is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in a second, or if your experience was a different one. And the other misconception is that they think they're going to have a full schedule right away from the beginning, which is not the case. And so you can't expect to have 40 hours a week. And the last thing is, you cannot even teach 40 hours a week. So I always recommend don't ever, ever, ever teach more than 30 hours a week. That's the absolute max in my book. Yeah. 20 to 30 hours. That is what I would consider a full-time position for a Pilates teacher. So when you do the math, and that's the other thing, like people don't know how to do the math because they don't get any clear idea, right? So I would say as a ballpark, divide the amount that the studio charges in half or a third. So somewhere I would say between a third, and you can maybe give input about that because you're a studio owner, between a third and 50% is what the studio is able to pay you, not because they don't want to pay more, but because there's just not more to go around. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, when I left marketing, I opened the studio, like I said, it was me on my own. And I was in there 4 days a week, like 9 till 8 p.m. And in my mind, I was doing a 4-day week job, not a 5-day week job. So that was like great. And then you very quickly realize that you cannot do that. You cannot, like, absolutely. I think 25 hours for me is full time with a teacher. And I think when you go more than that, I think you lose the quality of your teaching anyway, because you're just too tired. Because for all the things we've discussed about how much thinking there is, you know, in a session, how much thinking there is planning a session, like your hours of teaching are not just the hours that you work. So I think that's absolutely there. And I think, yeah, the financial side of it, it's very hard, you know, to kind of, when you're coming out of it going, what will I be paid? And I think, you know, yeah, I kind of think the percentages that you're talking about are absolutely right. And I think the other thing that I had never realized is, don't think because you're a studio owner, you're absolutely rolling in it. The margins are incredibly tight. You know, unless you probably run a fitness studio with a lot of people in it. But when you want to run something specialist, when you want to run small group classes, one-to-ones, like the margins are really tight. We did a piece of work recently where we you know, we've had the financial tricky, you know, difficulties we've had this year with the pandemic, and we really were transparent with the team, and we said, look, you know, we're charging, at the time we were charging I think £57 for a one-to-one, and I said, do you know what we make? £4.88. And that's before so that was kind of the running cost, but it didn't include insurance, it didn't include marketing, it didn't include my time. And I said, you know, so that's where we're at. And actually, as a result of that, we put our prices up a little bit. We were able to give a little bit more to them, a little bit more, you know, so it was kind of, we were able to do that. But I said, you know, you teach a one-to-one, and that's what we're making, you know, £5-6 a session. So because I think there was a feeling, and I might have got this wrong, but I felt there was a feeling from some clients and from some teachers during the difficulties that everyone's had financially, that like I was sitting on this big stack of money, when the reality was so different. And you know, the studio, the margins are very, very narrow. And so I think I had kind of come into this thinking, well, I don't just want to work for a studio. You know, I've got a business background. It'd be great to kind of have my own studio. And also I'll have a lot more, you know, ability to earn a decent living, to be able to leave my director job that I had before. But you know, it was a bit of a shock to the system, really, because me too, you look at the website figure and you multiply that, but you forget, you know, the booking software is like £300 a month. You know, there's so many costs that come on board, and the marketing of it, you know, the kind of hours that I give to training teachers and supporting teachers, and all of that. I mean, I'm not trying to make it sound miserable. I just think the reality of it needs to be come across. I think also people can also look at the cost of a training course and not realize you will need more than that. You will probably need to have some one-to-one sessions. You know, you will need to invest a little bit more in yourself. So you know, and then there's all the trainings that we've talked about that you want to do. And so I think you can be left feeling like where is the money in this? And I know that, like, if you were to, you know, very simply look at, as an example, like a maths class, or let's just take a yoga class. Yoga is often bigger numbers in a class, and you run the numbers and you run their training that is cheaper than our training, and you come out with a much better figure. Actually, you invest in, you know, £30,000-40,000 worth of equipment. And yes, you do charge a bit more, but you also then have smaller classes because you've got, you know, and you're kind of genuinely left going, where is the business case for equipment? And then I come back to, but this is how you get people well. This is how you get people better. And what I will say is, we have, you know, prior to this year that's just been, we have people that have been coming to us 3, 4, 5 times a week for a very, very long time. And there's not many studios that can say that, I think, because of the variety of things that we do, because of how the equipment makes them feel. So I do think, don't get me wrong, I think there's a reason why you do it, but I think sometimes you have to interrogate those figures and be really clear about them for yourself. And just the other point that you mentioned about not thinking you'll get a full schedule, I think this is something that people really miss the mark on. And I think people either think, like, if they're running their own thing, that it will just come to them, or especially when they come into a studio, that like the studio will do all the work. And whilst the studio, you know, I hope we do a good job of marketing it and bringing people in, each teacher is really their own business. They are their own success, and they have to understand that. They have to get those clients to, you know, they've come for a reason. There should be very few that leave, really, because there will be, like we've said, there are people that for whatever reason it's not for them. That's fine, you know, but there should be very few. And I think people sort of don't appreciate that. Like, if you have to spend some time nurturing the people that you've got. Those people will then talk to other people, you know, giving them the right advice, guiding them in the right way, obviously giving them a great session and all the rest of it. But, you know, the teachers that do that really well get busy, and the teachers that really struggle with that side of things don't. And that's not because they're not a good teacher. It's because they don't understand that piece, you know? And I think that's the real difference.
Absolutely true. I love that you bring that up because it's so important. Like, you can't, so I think it's, you know, with your situation, that's interesting, but because I think a lot of people who take a Pilates teacher training program, a lot of them, that's their second career, right? So like similar to you, myself as well. So I was an actor. So for me, it was always like, I'm my own thing. I have to take care of my own stuff anyway. But people who maybe transition from a more corporate job, you know, maybe they assume they're going to get hired by your studio for the full amount, like you would be hired by any other, you know, company. First of all, there's no benefits, right? There's no health insurance and nothing. And you can't expect to be hired and paid for 20, 30 hours a week immediately. It's like you said, you are in your own business. You're basically just being given the opportunity to teach. But you and I, as a studio owner, or you as a studio owner, we can give you a first-time client, right? We can do the marketing to get you in touch with prospective clients, but it's up to you as a teacher to keep that client and to keep them coming back again and again and again. And this ties back a little bit to what you said earlier in our conversation when you said Pilates teachers are not comfortable selling. And the good news about this is, what I want to say is, like, you don't actually have to sell. The pure selling, you don't have to talk anybody into this. All you have to do is show them in the session, show them what you know, show them how good this feels, and basically demonstrate in a kinesthetic way, demonstrate to them that they will benefit from this. And that's your selling. The selling, the taking the credit card, that's the transaction at the end of a class. But when I teach a lesson or a class, every single word that I'm saying, I know why I'm saying this. I'm not saying anything, you know, like there's this education part, there's making people aware of what you're doing. Like, I am a huge fan of explaining what I'm doing and why I'm doing this, because not only shows this that I have knowledge about the body, I'm not just, you know, somebody who did a weekend course. It builds rapport with the client, and it makes the client feel safe, that they, you know, feel they're in good hands, and then they start to trust you, and then you've sold them, you know, for the rest of their career.
I completely agree. I was actually having a chat with some of our teachers just recently, and saying very much the same thing, and explaining, you know, that's the process you should be doing in your session. I think if you have a fear, though, people pick up on that. So if almost at the end of the session you are nervous of, even though you've done all that stuff, you're nervous of that piece, then people kind of pick up on that. And the other piece that I've realized I've started to do on top of what you've said is, at the end of the session, especially a first session, saying, you know, so today what I really saw was blah, 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 and where I think we could go with this. Because, you know, in a first session, I'm trying to see how they move. Am I going to necessarily give them are they going to get the big aha moment in a first session? Like, no, they're not, probably. So, you know, I want to kind of, again, sort of say to them, so what I would be wanting to do with you in the next few sessions is maybe look at your pelvis, get a bit more balance, a bit more space in there. So actually the lower back feels a bit more comfortable. You'll start to feel easier. And then from that place, we can start to do whatever it is. And then basically you're saying to them, do you want that or not? As opposed to, do you want another session?
Yeah.
And then someone's like, oh, I'm not sure if I want another session because I don't know if that was, sometimes the first session isn't what they thought it would be. And the other thing I often do is I've realized, I've learned, I start to set the scene. I go, so today, it's your first session. Today is about me learning about your body. I'm as much just seeing how you move so I can get a sense of where I need to take you. And again, that's showing your expertise, isn't it? You're not just taking them through a fixed choreography of exercises that you've pre-planned. You are, when I interview teachers, I get quite frustrated when I get them to do a bit of teaching with me. And I go, so why did you teach me those exercises? That's what I practice. I said, so why did you ask me? And you did ask me what's going on in my body. Why did you ask me that if you then didn't do that? And so those, like you said, the communication piece, what you do in a session, how you end it. And then you're asking them, say, do you want to buy into this feeling?
Right.
And if the answer is no, fair enough, but it very rarely is.
Right.
And I think that's what people can miss really and can feel scared of. But you're right, like you're not selling anything. But it's funny how people use that word like a dirty word.
Yeah.
Like they've come here for your expertise. They have a need. So you need to showcase that and also provide expertise in the follow-up to that first session. And that for me is how you then build your hours.
Right. Correct. Yes, totally. I think it's a lot. There's two parts. One is a lot of teachers, I think, don't want to make the client feel bad by showing them their challenges or telling them what's wrong, quote unquote, with them, right? But I think you need to tell people because, again, first of all, it shows your expertise. It shows that you recognize what they're missing in their body, and it gives them a reason why they have back pain or whatever pain they have, right? And it shows them their need at the same time. So obviously you don't have to tell, oh my God, your abdominals are weak. You're not going to say that, or not in that way, but you say, yeah, you definitely have a lack of core strength and there's definitely a need. And that
I think that, I think it's a really good point. And I think there's a real fine balance though, because I think sometimes as teachers, we can have a bit of an ego and we can want to label why somebody is like they are. And the thing is, if somebody especially is coming with a lot of chronic pain, they have a list as long as your arm of things that are wrong with them and wrong with their life. And that's partly why they're in there. So I think you have to be quite balanced of like adding something else in. So I used to just not go there at all. And now actually where I've realized I've probably netted out a bit like you is it does show your expertise. I'm not trying to say your back's like that because of this, this, and this, but I can say to them, this is what I'm seeing. Okay. This is what I'm seeing. This might be why that left side of your spine is feeling really tight because I'm seeing this in your pelvis. But let me tell you this as well. Just because I'm giving you this information, this isn't information you can do anything with because posture is subconscious. And you thinking your left side of your pelvis is higher than your right, and then you spending your entire conscious mind trying to drop it, you're going to cause more problems. And I think a lot of people do that bit. They kind of give information like, they see a physical therapist or something and it's like, oh, they come to me and they go, my pelvis is like really posterior. So now I've been sticking my bum out. And you're like, no, please don't do that. Like there's a reason it was doing that. And in the session, you get them to find that space and then they stand up and they're like, oh, it's just kind of doing it. It's like, that's how it's meant to be. You're just meant to do it. So I think there's a fine balance, isn't there, about sharing your expertise, but not making them find fault with themselves and also educating them. Just because I'm telling you your left shoulder is higher than your right, don't just drop your left shoulder because it's going to make something else go wrong. But know that that's what I'm seeing and that's where I'm wanting to take you. So I'm showcasing my expertise that I'm not just, like I said, we're not just doing exercises. For exercise, any of those exercises is going to feel better, but that knowledge is what makes the difference, isn't it?
I appreciate that you mentioning that because that's what I meant. Maybe
no, I know
not that way, but thank you for
and I didn't mean it to you. It's something that I see a lot of, and I have seen a lot of in my career. And actually those teachers can do quite well because the clients kind of really buy into their expertise, but then I don't believe that's how you get people really well. Does that, I know you don't, because we've talked about this before, so I know that's not how you are, but I think there can be, and I see it in courses all the time. Well, this person's got this, and this, and that's why they're like this. It's like, if I've learned anything over my years is nobody can really truly tell you exactly what's going on because that neck pain might be being caused by your pelvis or your ankle or your knee. And all we can do, and I think that's why Pilates is so powerful, is it's a full body approach. So if someone comes in with neck problems, I don't really spend that much time on their neck. I look at the rest of the body and I want to see, because I'm thinking, well, I can create space and then let's just see how the neck feels, And I think that's the power, isn't it, of what we do is full body approach. Physical therapy is very powerful, but if you go in for a sore shoulder, they're going to manage your shoulder. What we do is look at the whole body and where you're standing, how you stand, how you move, how you lie, how you go from position to position. And that's what's amazing about this. And I think that's the piece that can be missed when Pilates is thought of as fitness, when they use the exercises in a fitnessy way, when I think it is about really understanding like that functional piece of like, you know, Joseph Pilates was very clever in some of the things that he came up with about how people move and how to get them to recruit certain things in their body. Like you said, like, absolutely, you can see that there's a weakness there and there's an imbalance there. And you need to showcase that to the person for sure, I think. But I think it's that fine balance, isn't it, of not making them think
and
that
if
there's something wrong with them.
Absolutely. And if I do, but I totally hear you. I think it's life is a paradox, I tell you. Like, you say one thing and immediately you can contradict it with another thing, because both things are true at the same time. It's all, everything in life is like that. So yes, absolutely. If I assess somebody and they have a million things sort of that are not, you know, that might be an issue, I'm not going to tell them the whole list. I might just pick one that focuses the most on what they can relate to in terms of their biggest pain or something, and the rest I keep to myself, obviously. You know, you'd never ever want to make somebody feel worse about them, but at the same,
and I think that's a balance, isn't it? Like, how much you correct someone is also a reading of them. Some people, a lot of correction is going to feel really good to them. They're like, oh, there's a load of knowledge here, I'm loving this. And some people, you've got to sense that you just, you know, even in classes especially, you know, don't keep going over to them. If you kind of, you know, just kind of let them do their thing. And if they're not in danger, which, you know, they're very rarely going to be, you got to let them kind of explore some stuff for themselves, haven't you? Because I think, and that's another piece that I think is really, it's just intuitive of how much you say and you don't say.
Yeah.
Because some people you need to say a lot, and some people you need to hold your tongue.
I had this one client who, she would not let me correct her, or I did try to correct her for like at least 2-3 years. And I got, every single time I corrected her, I just got a very standoffish reaction from her. And she just couldn't do it. She was overwhelmed with the pain in her body and everything. So I stopped. I just really stopped. I felt sort of bad, you know, not correcting her, but what she was doing was helping her. She kept coming back every week. So obviously it worked for her, but I could not, like, she couldn't take it until finally one conversation, and it probably wasn't my conversation, but maybe she started to feel better or something. And from that point on, all of a sudden she was able to, she took my corrections, and then I started to give her a little bit more. But yeah, those are the things that you just got to sort of sense. Yeah.
But that's the depth to this work that we talked about right at the beginning of this conversation. And that's the bit, that's experience, that's practice, that's kind of understanding that actually, you know, meeting people where they're at is also important. We shouldn't feel like we have to set the agenda for them just because we know what's best, because you have to take them on a journey. And for whatever reason, who knows what her history was, being corrected made her body kind of hold and tense, didn't it?
Yes.
But then she got to a place where she felt safe with you, I'm guessing, you know, safer, and it kind of went, and that kind of piece dropped back. Suddenly one day you say something and it can land, you know? And so that's the kind of depth to the work that we're talking about, isn't it? It's like, you don't know what their childhood was like, what their birth experience was like. You know, you don't know what their family situation is like, if they've got any issues at home currently. Like, you don't know any of that stuff, but all that stuff is in their body and in their reactions to things. And you have to at least have a sense that that is in there. I'm not saying you need to know how to deal with it, but I really believe passionately, and I think you're naive if you don't appreciate that. I think because that's when another teacher, Mara, could have very much, I don't know, they could have reacted to that whole situation very differently. Sure. You know, and actually, you know, the ability to adapt and shift.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's what's always interesting when you work with a new client. And even actually some of my long-term clients, I realize I get a bit too, like, kind of feel like I know what we're doing. And sometimes I need to step back and go, actually, where am I taking this person now? And, you know, and kind of keep moving them somewhere. I don't even mean like too advanced. I just mean, you know, challenging their systems in different ways and different ways of being, really.
Yeah, I'm loving it. So two questions. So if you were to hire a Pilates teacher right now, what are the most important skills that you're looking for?
So I absolutely want them to have a real top quality training, like that for me. Someone, a training that is very client centric in its approach. I'm not so into personally, because of the kind of studio I've got, like a more of a choreography base. Like I want people to be able to look at an individual and understand that that's how they work the Pilates repertoire. But I'm also looking for someone that, I don't know, they've got kind of an energy about them that you just feel kind of comfortable in their space, and that they listen to the person, and they will adapt as needs to be, and they're not afraid to do that, and they ask questions and they talk. And I think that's why I've actually started, like, I always used to kind of go and have a coffee with someone and I just chat to them. I want to get a sense of who they are as a person, because this is a people business more than anything, and people buy into people and people feel safe with people. And when you feel safe, your body will pretty much do anything, right? That's what the equipment really gives you as well, that feeling of safety. And so for me, that's a really important part, someone who's passionate about this work for all the right reasons and helping people, and just being personable, just giving people a really nice experience, and not, like I said, not trying to set an agenda. And I just tend to get that from just trying to get a sense of a person up front, and asking them questions like some of the things we've talked about today, like how would you approach this? How would you approach, like, a client that doesn't like being corrected? That kind of questions like, how would you approach it? I want to know those kind of things so that they understand it's not like you're training often, you're not going to be teaching other Pilates teachers. You are teaching real people with real backgrounds. And so, yeah, so that for me, and I know that's a bit of a, like, it's not like a tangible thing, but for me, over the years, I've recruited some really, really experienced people, but they didn't have that piece. And I think because of the kind of work we do, people need to have that. They need to have that conversation ability with somebody, that warmth, that feeling of being taken care of a little bit.
Yeah,
So that's what I look for.
yeah. I mean, so basically, you do need to know your stuff, like your knowledge about Pilates and the human body, but there's so many soft skills that are maybe even more important, like you said, because you're not an electrician. You're not dealing with the outlet and the client is not affected by it, right? You're working on the person's body. And yeah. Great.
Yeah.
That's probably, it probably answers the next question, but you can mention if you want to add something, like if there are any other qualities besides teaching skills that you're looking for in a teacher.
Yeah, so I think it is, it is that. And I think the ability to be able to meet the clientele. So where our studio is situated is in the middle of kind of a business district. So we have a lot of high achiever clients. I mean, we have probably more women than men, but it's like, you need to have somebody, depending on whatever the clientele is of the studio, you need to have someone who can meet those people. Now, if I was going to go and teach, for example, in a dancing school, I don't think I could meet those people as well. Okay. But I come from a corporate background. And so I'm able to kind of understand those people's lives. I'm not saying you need to come from a corporate background to teach people in corporate, but I think you have to have an understanding that, you're going to meet, these are high achievers. They're used to getting everything they want and being in control of stuff. So you kind of already have a sense that you're going to have some skills to be able to get them into a level. And, for me, I always think like Pilates is the route into wellness in a wider sense, because I think what a lot of high achievers especially like about Pilates is it's very scientific. And so they like that side of it. It doesn't feel too woo-woo for them, right? And they come in and they think it's really scientific. But I feel really passionately about the ability, and this is what I look for in teachers, just to seep in little ideas here or there. And these people listen to it because it's coming from someone in a kind of scientific capacity about how well-being is so much more than just what you might know or see, and that there's lots of kind of facets to it, and the kind of energetic side to things and stuff like that, is important. So I'm kind of looking for that kind of roundness in somebody, that they're open to some of that stuff. I'm not saying all my teachers are like that, they're not. But it's really interesting to look at the different clientele that work with different kinds of teachers. And it is to do with their personality. They are all pretty much trained the same way. But, I have one teacher she has her own chronic health issues. She has a lot of people with chronic health issues, and she gets it. She understands what it's like for them. You know, I have a lot of people with kind of neck and shoulder and back pain long term that felt like that was it for them, and you know, a lot of kind of people who were very senior in their jobs and things like that, you know. So one of my other teachers was a dancer, and she tends to do well with people who do that kind of work. So I'm not saying that's a fixed thing, but I think it's to understand that who you are as a person is as much part of your role as your trainings, I guess.
Nice.
You
That was a
know,
great way to put it. I think that was a really great way to put it.
yeah.
It's, yeah, who you are goes so deeply into the, and I think that's a good news too. That the good news is that you don't have to be anybody other than yourself. You can just be who you are. You're going to attract the kind of people who are like that. And in the beginning, that sometimes takes a little while. You got to figure it out. You might not, like I used to be a dancer, and I thought that I would relate to the dancers, but I actually didn't. And it took me a while to figure that out because I was an injured dancer, and I related more to the injured people, whether they were dancers or not dancers. I connected more with that aspect of my body's not working and I'm too young for my body not to work. So I have empathy for that versus the hardcore, you know, dancers. So sometimes it takes a little while, but you can be yourself. You're going to attract those kinds of people, and just watch who's coming to you and you'll figure it out, right? It's more like the listening part that you brought up, which I love, but just watch, who are your clients? That is what you're sending out. They'll show that sort of back to you.
And the thing that's just popped into my mind, if I could share it as well, is the power of intention. You know, I just did a whole class on it before we came on, actually, about setting intentions in a positive way, even in the restrictions that we're all living in at the moment. But I think your intention for your client, your intention for your career, your intention for, you know, what you're trying to create is really important. And I think to spend some time really thinking about that will help you attract those people in, the right people in, the people that you love teaching and they love being taught by you, because not everyone loves being taught by me, you know. And I'm open, I get that, you know, I have my way of doing things, and whilst I try and be as, you know, adapting to everyone's needs, like that, you know, there are other guys at my studio that have a very different client base that I don't think I would do so well with, and that's fine. And that's the other thing I'm looking for. I don't want everyone to be like me in my studio. I don't. For that very reason, I want there to be a diverse range of people, backgrounds, experiences, what they bring. But I think first and foremost that it's client centric and that you've got expertise, you know, in a nutshell. That's what I'm really looking for from somebody.
Awesome. Sounds great. So last question before we finish up. I want to ask about anything that you, as a former marketing professional, anything that you, or maybe one thing where you say, how would somebody, teacher or studio, what do you think the most effective way to market their classes would be? Anything?
It's a really good question. You know, I think the online world is huge. It can feel a bit of a dark art, some of the website stuff, but I think, you know, doing some research on things like SEO and maybe even paying somebody to help you a little bit with it. SEO, which is search engine, is basically how you get to the top of Google, is a huge part of it. It is a bit of a dark art, you know, even though that's my background, I still have somebody that helps me with it now because it changes all the time. So I think, you know, you've got to be seen. People have to find out about you. So I think, you know, an online presence is really important. But I think the other piece I think people can miss, if I can say, is that you need to have a big social presence to be a successful business. And I don't think that that's true. You know, I think it can help for sure, but I don't think you should necessarily think that just having a whole load of Instagram followers equals a really big business. I think, you know, really thinking about back to who you're trying to attract, who are you attracting, where are they, and meet them there, you know. And on online, it might be your website and getting that visible when people search, but it might be on forums, it might be. So I think spending some time really understanding, you know, your customer avatar, your ideal customer. There's some great kind of tutorials out there that you can look at to find out how to do that, but really understanding. And if you don't know who it is, it's probably you before you did your training, right? Initially anyway. That's who you're attracting, and get an idea of how they behave, where they are, what they're looking for, you know, because over the years of Soul, I've definitely refined it more and more and more, because the thing is, this work appeals to everybody. You know, it gives benefit to everybody. Like there's that old joke, isn't there? Like whatever the problem is, Pilates is the answer. But realistically, if you talk to everybody, you talk to nobody. So you have to be niche. You have to have a bit of a niche. You have to kind of be, you know, somewhat kind of like, this is who we are and this is what we stand for. So have I trained world #1 athletes? Yes, I have. But is that what I really sell myself at? No, I sell myself very much. We're a rehabilitation specialist studio. We get a lot of referrals from medics, from medical professionals, from surgeons and things like that. And so, you know, then other people will find us, will see that message. It will either talk to them. It might not talk to them directly, but they might go, oh, but I like the sound of that. Does that make sense? So I think being really clear on who you're trying to attract and talk to that one person. So spend some time working on that customer avatar, and then whether you build a digital presence, which is probably what you're going to do these days, you know, but you can talk in the language that they're wanting. Because I think the big problem is, back to, I think we said it right at the beginning, kind of the word Pilates is kind of the problem, because it can mean a million different things. And so I think you have to be clear on who you are, what you're about, and who you're talking to. And that would be my biggest piece of marketing advice. I think not a lot of people do that. They just think, I say I teach Pilates on Tuesday night in this place, and then that's it.
Right,
Well,
because
who's gonna
people
come?
don't know at all what that means. If you talk to somebody about that, like, or if somebody asks, that's, you know, that's another interesting thing. I think that's so funny. Like when you meet somebody at a party, whatever, right? Not right now, but you know, back when, yeah, and they ask what you do, and you say you're a Pilates teacher, they immediately, I think of you working out. They think of you doing Pilates and being an athlete or whatever, or sporty. They don't
Yeah.
even realize what it is that you do. Like, or, you know, yeah, you work out and other people are working out while you're working out. I think that's what people think when they think you're a Pilates teacher.
Or they say, is it a bit like yoga? And you're like, oh, not really.
And that's
But you
that's
know,
the same thing,
yeah,
right? It's like
yeah,
they imagine
exactly.
people that they see on YouTube or on TV or whatever, a teacher doing exercises. They don't know what we do with clients at all.
No.
So right. So and it doesn't mean anything to a person that, you know, Pilates, what that will do for them in their body. So
And I think that's it. And that's really the marketing piece, just
yeah,
to kind of condense it, is I think to really, and it's quite a big piece of work to do, and to really think about who you really enjoy teaching, who gets the most, who you enjoy teaching, and who they seem to get out of it. And when you start to think about that, it will become clear. And also ask yourself, who don't you enjoy, and why is that maybe? And you know, you can kind of analyze that too. I did this piece recently, and it was like, I find it really hard when people are just not ready to kind of meet it, and I end up going into a bit of a preachy space, and I don't like myself for doing it, but you know, it's like that kind of thing. And then you start to really then think about the language that you use, and the where you pitch your classes, the price you pitch your classes, where you advertise yourself, you know, and that kind of thing. And I think then when people find you, you will talk to those people, because if you talk to everybody, nobody listens. You have to be quite clear on, you know, who you're talking to. And I think that, you know, that can be quite hard, because at the beginning I was very much guilty of this. It's like, well, I'll see who comes and then I'll work it out.
hmm yeah, and I guess in the beginning, like you said, sometimes you have to watch who comes to you over time until you figure out who you really resonate with, right? That can take a little bit of time, but at least start somewhere, right? It's better to start with a plan and then change it than to start with no plan, because nothing's going to happen.
My avatar has changed many, many
Yeah.
times, and that's fine. And they're not completely different, but you know, they've moved on. But I think you have to start somewhere, because otherwise, if you sort of see who's going to come,
Yeah,
you're kind of, there's going to be a lot of wastage there potentially.
for sure.
And you want to just be really efficient of who comes to you.
I want to give one quick concrete example, because I think the difficulty sometimes with these like recommendations is they're so general that, you know, they're hard to act on. But I want to give one concrete example from my own life. So I started, like you probably do, I started with just mat classes, and, you know, just me, and just increase that. And I realized that the people, like most of the people who were coming to me, had definitely some major thing wrong with them. And then you have the hardest time teaching mat class to all those people, right? Because one person has osteoporosis, the other one has stenosis, and then you're already like, okay, we're going to stay in neutral now for the whole class. So I realized that was what happened. So I actually changed my complete studio. Like I stopped offering mat classes eventually, a few years down the road, because I couldn't, like, those are not the people that came to my studio, the people who I could just comfortably put into a mat class. I mean, some of them, but it was not, I had to change it because everybody who came to me was somehow injured or at least close to it or something. So yes, it can be fluid, allow
Yeah.
things to change if they have to, but definitely start with some sort of a plan. It is better to start with a plan and to take specific action and change it than to have no plan and no action at all.
And one of the other pieces that we've done this year is I've created our new like online platform, Move Better TV, which, is Pilates online and all the kind of things that we're trying to talk about. But how do you try and get that across online, which is really difficult, but I don't think it's really being done. And we've worked really, really hard on, how we have a mix of some online live classes, but also kind of the on-demand content. But I had to do that very piece. And it's like, well, it's Pilates online. And it's like, but who are we talking to? And what are we about? And, we realized that and it's not to say men don't come, right? Because actually we've got quite a few men, but we are absolutely about targeting a woman. And she's kind of 30 to 50. She is probably in pain. She's probably got a really low energy. She wants to feel good, And then I kind of had that idea. I got it up and running. And then we sent a survey out, and I deliberately did the survey where I didn't have tick boxes. They had to write answers, and the same words came up again and again and again. Energy, pain, lack of time. Energy, pain, lack of time. I want to feel energy. I haven't got time. And it was just like, how interesting, because that's kind of what I was thinking of. Like, that's for me what felt right for me, to kind of think, okay, this is who it is. And so that was the language that we wrote the copy about, was, this is about helping you feel energized, helping you, small bite-sized pieces that you can always fit in to make sure you always do something. But, also plans where we take people, it almost reminds me of a bit like a retreat. When you take someone on a retreat, it's really great because you can kind of, even more than the studios, you can take them class by class by class through concepts. And we created movement plans that would do that. So we could take somebody on a journey as best as you can online. And so, I feel really proud of that. But that kind of answers that piece. Pilates online could be for everybody. And I would like to think that platform is benefit to everybody. But, we very much wanted to kind of follow this idea of creating that ideal customer. And it is really interesting that in the end, they were the words that kept coming back time and time again. And so now every time we write some copy, I'm saying to myself, do we talk about lack of time? Do we talk about energy? Do we talk about how do we help people out of pain? Why, so suddenly our YouTube content has stuff about us talking about why are you in pain? Some of the stuff we've talked about it's more than just a pathology in your body. So, it's kind of an interesting piece, but I think Pilates is so wide, you have to put a stab in the dark somewhere of this is who it is. And absolutely you can move it, like I have many times, but I think it's important to do that.
Oh, that's wonderful. So good. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
So our studio is soulpilates.co.uk. And the online platform, which is obviously worldwide, is movebetter.tv.
Awesome. So thank you so much. I mean, I love this conversation. I think we touched upon so many things. I could talk 3 more hours.
I'm so sorry. This is so long. I just got really into it. I was like, oh, there's actually so much to talk about.
There is endless things to talk about. So that was fantastic. And if anybody's interested in starting a teacher training program, check out pilatesencyclopedia.com/teacher-training. And watch out for more of these conversations coming out on YouTube shortly. Have a wonderful day, Nic.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you'd like to see more cool information, head over to pilatesencyclopedia.com. I'll see you next time.